So, how should reparations be paid? And, why do you think that, because there was a poll recently where they asked, non-Black, Americans or just non-Black people if Black people deserve reparations, and overwhelmingly they said no. So why do you think that non-Black people said, these are non-Black people, when
non-Black people.
Why do you think they don't think that Black Americans deserve reparations? And how would you go about giving reparations to Black Americans?
Good question. First of all, why does the opinion of an Asian matter at all? You are not an enslaver. You are not an enslaved. You understand me? What does the opinion of someone who had nothing to do with my tragedy, why does their opinion even matter? I'll tell you why it matters. America wants to create this illusion of a multicultural society where race don't matter. And America knows, because everybody wants to be here so badly, they don't have a problem shitting on Black people to improve their relationship with the white power structure. So if you ask the Asian, do Black people deserve reparations? Of course not. You ask the Arab, do Black people deserve reparations? Of course not. You ask the European Jew, who got reparations? Do Black people deserve reparations? Of course not. But we should not be surprised. If I don't value Black life, why the hell would I care about you receiving compensation for unpaid labor, damages, and harm? They don't value African life. So of course they don't give a damn about you getting no reparations. You understand me? Right. Because they're not approaching this question from an issue of justice or perspective of justice or equality. They're approaching this question from a perspective of racism, bigotry, bias, and discrimination. Right. Nobody wants Black people to get anything because they want to take your place. You understand me? The Asian don't want you doing better than them in America. You understand? The Arab don't want you doing better than them in America. The European Jew don't want you doing better than them in America. The Latinos don't want you doing better than them in America. So of course, if somebody put a microphone in their mouth and say, should Black people get something that you're not going to get, why would they say yes?
They prefer us to be a punching bag.
Absolutely. And my question is, it's none of your business.
All right.
This is an issue between Black people and white people. What the Chinese man thinks is irrelevant. What the Latino thinks is irrelevant. What the European Jew thinks is irrelevant. What the Arab thinks is irrelevant. You're not the enslaved or the enslaver. Who the hell cares what you think about it? But because we're so multicultural, the power structure can use those non-Black opinions against us. Because they can say, since you see the Latino as your brother and sister, since you see the Arab as your brother and sister, and we are all Americans, because Black people love that Americanism, which is another reason why we're not going to get reparations, because the white man knows you would rather be an American and get reparations. If you got to choose between the two, most Black people want that red, white, and blue flag more than anything else, right? And so as a result of that, the power structure can then say, since you consider yourself to be a part of the family of America, most of us don't think y'all should get reparations. So why don't we put it on the next federal election and see how many Americans think Black people should get reparations? And then they could just block out the whole thing and say, most Americans don't think this is a good thing for the country. You see? And you know how they were able to do that? Because we started identifying with this country more than ourselves. We should have never bought into this American citizenship garbage. We should have never allowed that. Just like we should have never bought into people of color. We should have never bought into minority. We should never bought into disadvantaged communities. All of these are labels that clump you in with all non-white people that allows the government to take care of their needs and never take care of yours. And nobody even see you not being taken care of, because guess what? Your issues are being smothered by Arab issues, Latino issues, Chinese issues, homosexual issues. So nobody even realized Black people still suffering because you allowed yourself to be defined in such a way that other groups were included with you. That's the worst thing you can do as a people with such a unique history as we have in this country. We have to stand up and stand out like a sore thumb. But because most Black people have been brainwashed by church that being race first is a sin, right? And because most Black people have a low racial self-esteem problem, the last thing they want to do is stick out. We are too neurotic about being Black. We are too insecure about being Black. We are too anxious about being Black. We don't want to stick out. We want to blend in. And that's how that multicultural weapon was used against us.
Because, right now when we're having this conversations, there's a lot of words being interchanged. We got African Americans, we got Blacks, so some people would say that Black Americans have an identity crisis. We don't know if we want to identify as Black. We don't know if we want to be African American. We got FBA, we got Moors. We got all these different terms to describe Black indigenous slaves, or you get what I'm saying? So do you think that Black people in America have an identity crisis?
I think most Black people in the world have an identity crisis. You got to remember, when a white man went into the Caribbean, If you were a British subject, you may have called yourself British. If you went into French West Africa, there are Africans who might still consider themselves subjects of the French Empire. You understand me? Most Africans globally have an identity crisis because we have been conquered by white people. Remember, only once upon a time, the only independent country you had on the face of this earth that was black was Ethiopia. That's the only free black country on the face of the earth at one time. And we were forced to do what? Speak out, speak our oppressor's language, wear his clothes, worship through his religion, and identify with his flag. So we all had, and many of us still have, an identity crisis. Now, as far as all the different ideologies and political ideologies, here's what I say to that. I don't give it a lot of attention because I think most black people know they're from Africa. So when people lie and say you're not from Africa, you're a Cherokee or a Choctaw, this or that, most black people have enough common sense and command of the history to know where they came from. I mean, you have DNA analysis now. We don't even have to debate this philosophically. We can find out genetically. Give some blood and let's see if the Cherokee Nation comes up on the damn paperwork. You understand me? It's not going to come up because you're an African. But again, nobody wants to be on a losing team. So look at the contradiction. We'll get mad at a Jamaican African brother or sister who doesn't identify with us. We'll get mad at an immigrant Nigerian African brother or sister who don't want to identify with us. But you got American Africans right here who will tell you they're not African. I'm a Cherokee. Crazy. I'm a Native American. I'm an alien. I'm a this, I'm a that. And we don't say nothing to them. You see? So how is them not wanting to be an American African any different than a homegrown American African telling you I ain't African? You see what I'm saying? I get what you're saying. The harm is equal. So why separate it? See, as Pan-Africanists, we don't see, there's really no differences. The same isms and schisms and self-hate that we have in America, they have it in Africa. They have it in the Caribbean. There's Jamaicans who will tell you they're not from Africa.
They got over in there, they don't really, they have racism, obviously, but since the majority of the continent is black people, they have a whole thing called xenophobia now, like, where you discriminate from another African because they live in a different country. Like, you get what I'm saying? So
they do, but a lot of the xenophobia, and it's not justifiable, but a lot of the xenophobia is economically related because what happens is you live in South Africa. He lives in Namibia, hypothetically.
It's the classes, you mean?
No, stay with me.
Yeah.
So you are boycotting your job because y'all want higher pay. So they come to Namibia and tell you, get me 100 Namibians, come to South Africa, we need y'all to break this protest. You hungry, you got kids to feed, so guess what you do? You come across national lines and you break the South African protest, now you just gave birth to that xenophobia. Why would you bring your black ass to my country and sabotage my fight for better pay? You see that? So a lot of the xenophobia in Africa is economically related. It's the white man, again, putting black people against black people. It's the same thing they do over here with us. It's no different.
So which division you think is more important to fix first? The division here in the U.S. or the division in Africa?
It's always global because we do not live in a isolated box. And that's the problem when people say you got to take care of the African-American thing first. That's ridiculous because you may never take care of the African-American thing. So the whole African world goes to hell because we didn't fix this first. And you'll find that you can actually do a better job of fixing local issues when you tap into the global issues because you're cutting yourself off from ideas. You're cutting yourself off from strategies. You're cutting yourself off for resources that can be put in play locally. And the thing that I always get with people, why can't you do two things at once? Can't you carry water over here and still carry a cake over here? When you drive in your car, ain't you staying with your arms and using the gas and the brake with your foot? Why? Only when we deal with politics and black solutions do people say you can only do one thing at a time. You can do both. Every Pan-Africanist in history has done both. We focus on the global unity of the race while we attack our domestic problem. The most honorable Marcus Garvey from right here in New York City was more instrumental in a lot of the changes that came to black people in New York City than local black elected officials. And he was a Pan-Africanist. So people have this perception that Pan-Africanists only care about the global agenda. Yes, the global agenda is king. You damn right. But my local issues matter just as much. Because if I'm trying to organize people to join the global fight, what better way to do that than to show and prove where I am? You understand? I'm a Pan-Africanist, but name me a school psychologist who puts some more work for our kids than me right here in America. Nobody. Historically, there's no psychologist who's ever done for black people what I've done for black people as it relates to training parents and making sure they can protect their children. I'm the greatest in that area. but I'm still a Pan-Africanist. Why can't I do two things at once?
Right.
I'm going to Johannesburg next month, Ethiopia next month, Guadeloupe, Jamaica. I could still be in the streets of Philadelphia protesting. I could still be in New York handling what I got to do. You follow what I'm saying?
Right.
Our problems are multi-systemic, and the solutions must be multimodal as well. We just can't put all eggs in one basket and wait for that basket to sell before we get another basket. That's ridiculous. You're working on something while he's working on something, while you're working on something, while I'm working on something, while he's working on something. There is no one problem at a time. That's ridiculous.
Right. So, what would be your solution to reparations, and how should that be?
Well, for me, a couple things. Number one, the psychological cost of reparations has not been effectively quantified yet. That's being left out of the conversation. You can get more for psychological damage than you could get for unpaid labor. You feel me? 246 years of unpaid labor, that's nothing compared to the psychological terrorism that white people has reaped on our ancestors. That's in our soul, in our DNA, in our blood.
Right.
I don't hear enough people talking about the psychological cost. That's your biggest pay right there. And when I say pay, I don't say cash because I think cash payment is a trap. I don't have a problem with cash being on the list, but it should not be primary, especially now, because you have BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, who are about to float their own currency. They're going to tie it to the gold reserves in their countries, and that's going to drop the value of the dollar. So if the U.S. dollar is about to plummet, why in the hell would you accept payment for your ancestors' dehumanization through a worthless American dollar? Money is a trap. But all these thirsty reparations people, all they want is some money. I mean, let's just be honest. Half the people talking about reparations just want to check. They have no vision for changing nothing for Black America. They have no history of grassroots struggle. They're YouTubian opportunists, most of them. They're not deep thinkers.
I honestly don't think Black people would be financially responsible enough to use that money. I think we just gonna get that money right back.
It's gonna be cause and change.
We are.
Cause and change.
Which is another issue that I have with our approach to reparations. When did we come together and choose people to represent us in this conversation and in this negotiation?
Who is it though?
People are self-selecting themselves. You know why? Because we are disorganized. So before there's any reparations conversation, before there's any distribution of reparations, we have to first organize and elect the people we want to represent us. You just can't have somebody on YouTube popping up, I'm the face, I'm the face. That's why Black America always gets exploited. Because we are disorganized, anybody can claim to be the leader. You can go out here right now and say you're the leader of Black America, and guess what? Nobody's probably going to oppose you because we are so disorganized. And a disorganized people are ripe for opportunists. Opportunists love disorganization because it gives you the right to do anything and not be held accountable for it. So number one, we need to be organized. And until we get organized, there should be no conversation on reparation. Because I'm going to tell you what the white man going to do. We already know what he's going to do. He's going to look for people he can use. And he's going to give the reparations to them, and he's going to dictate how they use the reparations. Y'all follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
So he's not sweating this. He said, okay, this how y'all want to handle this? No organization, no conversation, just a few, okay, well, let me select him because I know I own him. And let me select him, I know I own him. And y'all going to use this money just for basketball and football. You understand me?
Right.
It'll be a joke.
Right.
A disorganized people should never go to war with an organized people.
Right. That's fair.
There has never been a war in history where a disorganized group of people won against an organized group of people. Show me where. We can't. And reparations will be no different. On top of that, you need an infrastructure to catch the reparations, to make sure that the Black dollar circulates several times before it leaves your community.
Right.
The Black dollar leaves our community in less than 24 hours. So if you accept a cash payout, all you did was serve as a middleman between the Federal Reserve and every thirsty merchant in the Black community raping us financially. Because every penny you get from reparations is going to go to the Chinaman, to the Arab, to the Jew. It's going to Mercedes, it's going to Nike. And then Black people say, you don't know that that's true. Yes, I do know that that's true. You know why? Because as a psychologist, the best predictor of future behavior is current behavior.
Right. And
so you mean to tell me we're going to radically change our spending habits with the reparations money?
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
When you've never been responsible with your own damn money? What happened to all the stimulus checks Black America got? What do we do with that for the people? What about our tax returns? What do we do with that for the people? What have we done since Dr. King's murder 55 years ago, financially and collectively, to transform our reality? Nothing at all. And that's why I've said I do not believe that the current generation of African people should be responsible for the dissemination or discussion over reparations, because we haven't done anything worthwhile that will entitle us to that type of responsibility, right? So we should get our land back. All the land that was confiscated from African people between the end of slavery and the end of Reconstruction. You're talking about tens of thousands of acres. All the land got to come back. All of the inventions that Black people invented, everything from the gas mask to the stoplight, refrigerated truck, the golf tee, the ironing board, all of that reverts back to us as a permanent patent. And whenever you use it, we got to license it to you. We get paid for it. Black music, all Black music, only Black people. One of the biggest reparations settlements we can have. Only Black people can own, sell, publish, promote, or perform Black music.
That's big, right? That's
Black music is one of America's top exports.
Right.
This country makes more money off selling Black talent than almost anything else she sells. If we owned Michael Jackson's catalog, Sam Cooke's catalog, the Beatles catalog, think about that.
Prince catalog.
Prince catalog, all of them. We have enough money to build a Black Wall Street in every city. We got to get the music. Any reparations package that does not give us exclusive control of our music, as far as I'm concerned, is a loss. Because Black music is too powerful, too globally influential, and brings in too much revenue for us not to control the music.
Are you referring to like the past music or current?
Past and present. Past and present.
You think
In other words, Sony Records, Warner Brothers, Universal, you've made billions of dollars off those catalogs. Pass them on over now. Do you feel me? They've made more than enough money off of our deceased artists.
Right.
You understand me? More than their families made. It's time to revert them on back.
What you think?
And we can't let nobody trivialize that, because how are you going to just take it back? The same way white people went into Palestine and took land from the Palestinians and gave the Israelis, the European Jews, a country of their own.
But that go back to the war thing. Like they shed blood for that. They went over there with organized. You know what I mean? And was able to assert
But that was an
themselves.
act of the global white power structure. The European Jews themselves didn't go over there and wage war.
Okay.
The U.S. and Britain, they did that. And the reason they did that is they wanted to have a satellite country amongst the Middle Eastern nations that they could use as a spy in a military base in case they need to go to war with Iran or Iraq. In other words, it benefited America and the UK to have Israel right here amongst the Arabs. So if we need to go to war, we can launch from right here. They was looking out for themselves, really.
Always.
You see.
What
But also in addition to that, America's natural resources. America has like 10 major natural resources. We should get a 25% cut of the revenue of all those natural resources into perpetuity, permanently, forever. You
What about
follow me?
tax exemption? Should that be on the table as well?
I'm not against it. It's
Okay.
not the most important thing, though.
All right.
Because if you're economically empowered, you really don't care what your taxes are. We have to
It's
think
the
like
Native
wealthy.
Americans that aren't they like exempt from taxes and stuff?
Who
like
is?
that? Native Americans?
I'm not sure. They might be.
I think that was part of the.
I'm not against it.
Right.
But I don't, when you think of a reparation settlement, the whole purpose of the settlement is to empower your people,
Right.
right? There's no billionaire in America who's fighting for a tax exemption because he's making enough money to pay them. Are y'all following me? We got to
Or
make
they
sure.
find loopholes in the system where
They
don't gotta
find
pay.
loopholes to pay less. I agree with
Right.
that. But they're not going to sleep worrying about their tax bill. Jay-Z and Tyler Perry are not losing sleep over their tax bill because they're wealthy. We have to make sure that we don't approach reparations, which is supposed to be an empowerment vehicle for African peoples, with a poverty mindset. You follow me? It's like if somebody said black people should never have to pay to park on the street again. Who the fuck cares?
Right.
You follow me? Do you feel me? If you got enough revenue coming in, who cares about that?
Right.
If we have to be concerned about a tax exemption, then you're automatically telling me that whatever we're getting for reparations isn't enough to sustain our families. You feel me?
Yeah.
If we got to be concerned about a tax exemption, whatever we got on that reparations list is not enough to sustain us. Because if you still got to hide from your taxes, you're not making enough money. You feel me?
That's right.
So that means we got to go back to the drawing board.
So with these big companies controlling like the politicians, how likely you think it is for us to get our music back from these big companies? Like,
Well, remember, your negotiations are with the government. So it's the government that got to go to the Jewish corporations that own our music and say, this goes to them now. We don't care if y'all like it or not. And you know why the Jewish music companies can't say nothing about it?
Wow.
Because they participated in our slavery too. So they couldn't say, well, you know, this was just business. No. Y'all financed the slave ships. You were the ones who paid the slave masters for slaves who showed up deceased or missing an arm or missing a leg, or the ones who committed suicide. European Jewish companies were the biggest financiers and insurers of the slave voyages. They were also slave owners. Okay? The Secretary of
you
War.
bordering anti-Semitism. That's what they're going to say.
No.
Right
This
now.
is truth. Anti-falsehood. Secretary of War for the Confederacy, I believe, was a European Jew. He owned over 100 slaves, I believe.
So that's not enough bloodshed. You get what I'm saying? You know, the time of slavery, all the black people that died. That's not enough bloodshed for us to get reparations the right way.
Of course it is, but here's the problem. Here is the problem. You were enslaved to give white people an eternal advantage over everyone else in the world, economically and politically, including you. With reparations, you're asking this white man to undo, repair, reparations. You're asking him to undo the unfair advantage he spent the last 500 years building for himself.
Right.
And that's why I'm going to go back to my earlier point. I don't think we get reparations without war. People have went to war for less than what we are entitled to. And here's the big question you got to ask yourself. Because from a Garvey perspective, it's all about power. It ain't about equality. It ain't about justice. It ain't about Jesus. It ain't about voting. It ain't about being an American. It ain't about equity. You know what it's about? The power you have to force the white man to do what he don't want to do. And here's my question. What are black people going to do if the white man gets on television right now and say, I'm not getting anything for reparations? We took a poll and most Americans don't feel it's necessary. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Tear up their own community.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We're going to protest and tear up our own communities and devalue.
And the very next day, you'll be having lunch and cheese with the same white folks who said you don't deserve reparations.
That's the sad part.
Do you feel me? You have to understand something. We haven't had a comprehensive, sustained movement for systemic change in this country since Dr. King. No matter what people may say or think about Dr. King, he was the last leader to give us a real movement. Nobody has given you a movement since Dr. King. You've had your Million Man marches for one day. You've had your Al Sharpton rallies for one day. You had your Jesse Jackson get-togethers for one day, but you have not had a movement, not a sustainable one, not a comprehensive one. The last time was Dr. King. The point that I'm making, black people are politically lazy and white people know it.
That's why I find it hard for, us to be patriotic for a place that doesn't love or care for us.
But we are the most patriotic.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And you know why we're the most patriotic? Because we're the most psychologically homeless. Black people are very neurotic about their identity. We hate Africa, where we come from. We cling to America. We will go around the world and brag about being an American, although you enjoy almost no rights. Immigrants who are not even citizens have more rights than you. You have Ukrainians right now getting the Social Security checks, free housing, free medical care, free education. But you have the highest black homelessness rate since the 1960s. How you got Ukrainians who not even citizens living better than black people who built the country? And the reason it's so difficult for us to change that is black people care more about their American citizenship than they do about justice. The minute you bring up, maybe we should disidentify as American citizens, it's certainly an option. It's certainly an option. You have a whole refugee law in the United Nations that would allow us to say we're not being treated like Americans. We no longer identify as Americans. We are Africans in exile, or whatever name we want to give ourselves. But we are definitely not Americans, and we are protected by the United Nations under their refugee laws and their anti-genocide conventions. We would get more rights as refugees in this country than we do as so-called American citizens.
I mean, everybody else have the location. They got Little Italy, Chinatown. There's no place
No
for
Little Africa. Nowhere in this country where you go where black people own the school, the hospital, the bank, and the supermarket.
Facts.
4 major institutions, not to mention manufacturing and distribution. But we are $2 trillion a year. $2 trillion a year. No institutions. Half your HBCUs are supposed to be closed in the next 30 years. God forbid that doesn't happen. But you want more money. But you want more money. To do what exactly? You mean to tell me you can't spend the $2 trillion you got responsibly? But now you want the ancestors' money so you can splurge that too. If I had a vote, I vote no. That money, none of it none of the restitution package gets disseminated amongst Black America until Black America organizes itself and begins to act responsibly. I would say this, build the institutions with the $2 trillion that you got. And once you build the institutions, then you get the reparations. Prove that you can handle this. Prove you are responsible enough to deal with these reparations. Build some institutions. Until we get those 5 major institutions in 20 major Black cities, no reparations should be disseminated because we're going to do nothing but waste it and give it back to non-Blacks.
That's fair.